individual pages on Facebook if you choose to. Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening. This is Jamie Green, and president and founder of A Mother's Cry. And I'm really excited about tonight's conversation, right? I know I say that a lot, pretty much with every conversation, but I'm really excited tonight to have some really powerful voices with us as we acknowledge Black Maternal Health Week. And it's important for us to acknowledge Black Maternal Health Week because it is a reality that probably should not exist, but it does exist, that Black women are still at greater risk during pregnancy and childbirth than other nationalities or other groups of people. So we're going to tonight talk about this. We have mothers who have lived experience on the line. We have a doula who's going to talk to us about childbirth and the importance of the environment that you're in, how that plays a role in you having a successful childbirth. And then I'm so honored to have a young lady with us tonight who's bringing a whole different perspective to our conversation. She was pregnant while she was incarcerated. And so now she goes across the nation and talks about the healthcare system behind the wall with regard to women who are incarcerated and other things. She'll tell you a little bit more about that. So first, I want to welcome all of my guests for our conversation. I want everybody just to relax. A couple of you haven't ever had a conversation with me like this before. And I just really like to have a conversation. I don't want it to be an interview. I don't want everybody to be uncomfortable. I just want you to respond from your heart and share, in response to whatever question I ask you. But before we get started, I'd like for everyone just to tell the audience your name and a little bit about what you're bringing to this conversation. I'll start with my sister, Kelly Green.
Okay, hi, my name's Kelly Green, as Jamie stated, and I am and have been a mental health therapist for over 20 years. And so I kind of bring, I guess, to this experience, though, more of my own lived experience about, I had three sons, and my second son was stillborn. So he died in utero, and just moving past that place and still being able to parent and love on my children. And then I also was blessed at 39 to give birth again after 20 years of a vacation. So I think when it comes to that, it's just different for me in terms of the ages of me and the children. So that's, I guess, what I bring, a little bit of flavor experience to the maternal side.
Absolutely. And also, one of the reasons I invited you, Kelly, to join us tonight is because of your lived experience, but also as a faith leader, because you are a pastor, and in your therapy work, you also understand the importance of spirituality and how that helps us to even deal with situations such as this. All right, next, Latoya, could you introduce yourself, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Hi, everyone. I'm Latoya Deal, and I am on this platform representing my company, Womb and Wellness, where I am a doula. So I'm helping with labor, postpartum, and not only am I a doula, but physically and spiritually. So I've always dealt with that, and now that I've taken a class and gotten certified, I understand so much more. So that's what I'm here for. And I also had 5 births myself, so I know a little bit about labor, all different types of labor. But now that I'm a doula, I know I did it all wrong all those times. Yeah.
That's funny. Well, we're glad that you survived. No matter what, you're still here. The babies are still here. We're grateful for that. Okay, Jasmine.
Hello, I'm Jasmine Abbott Banks, and I just bring a bit of lived experience. I have one child, and that birth was a bit traumatic. I had HELP syndrome, so I bring a bit of lived experience with that. And also, shortly thereafter, I had another kind of traumatic experience after that as well. So I bring lots of lived experience.
And thank you so much for being willing to share your story tonight, Jasmine. All right, Miss Christie, I want you to introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about what you bring to this conversation.
Oh, sure. Thank you so much for having me, Reverend Green. My name is Christy Puckett. I serve as the Chief of Staff of the Second Chance Federation. We are a nonprofit law firm that was established by formerly incarcerated people to fight on behalf of currently and formerly incarcerated people. And because we know how the healthcare inside of the prisons and jails operates, which is varied, right? And so the pregnant people who are incarcerated have different experiences depending on where they are, what facility they're in. And so I was pregnant while incarcerated because I was a perinatal substance user and had my substance use disorder criminalized as well as my pregnancy. And I've used that life experience to shape policy and how do we treat people who are in need, people who are suffering. Do we support them or do we judge them and do we lock them up? And so my work is to humanize and to destigmatize the folks who are pregnant and who are the most vulnerable, which are the people who are incarcerated and or substance using while they are pregnant. And I've worked across the country on policies to help support women who are pregnant, postpartum and incarcerated, because most of the women who are incarcerated, about 90% of them are mothers and caregivers of children. And so how they are treated inside is a maternal health crisis. It impacts every single one of us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, ladies. I'm excited to have each one of you here because each one of you carries a truth that is uniquely yours that can help somebody who will be listening to our conversation tonight. So let's start with first. I want to thank you for being willing to be, to even be transparent tonight with your conversation. So I'm going to start with LaToya. Let's talk about what is happening in the room where life is supposed to be protected. What, in basic terms, what exactly is supposed to be happening, I should say, in the room where life should be protected as it enters the world?
So what should be happening is sort of almost like, I'll say ministry because I know ministry. You got to set the atmosphere. And that's the same thing with bringing a child into the world. You should set the atmosphere and you should, like, essentially for me, we have a plan. We have a birth plan already before we go in there. So I know what my mom wants. I know if she likes music. I know if she likes lights, if she wants the lights on. I know to bring my candles. I know which aromatherapies that she likes. We've tried this already at home. So we prepare essentially for that part of the process. And then we set a tone and we come, like I give it to the mom, I give it to the doctor. We've all reviewed it. So we know her goals are planned for this birth. And then we try to just go with it. For me, because I'm a spiritual person, we start with prayer. And then we just set the atmosphere from there to try to have it flow in the way that the mom wants, if it's God's will and everything goes perfectly that way it is. And sometimes that does not always happen, but also with providing her a voice and advocacy so no one pushes her with time. Because a lot of times when you go to the hospital, everything is based off of a time. They got a time. So when you get past a certain time, they ready to throw you in the OR or something like that. So just, making sure that we have a plan and a process and the atmosphere is set and we're advocating. Especially us, we have to have advocates and education, because if you don't know, you're going to say yes to anything. Yeah. I've had births where they were about to push my mom to the OR based off of what they were saying, and it was not the reality. But and in that moment we could do nothing but pray, but God interceded and his will was done. And it ended up being exactly what the mother wanted and not the system, not the facility. So that's the real role, just being an advocate and setting the atmosphere, because the atmosphere matters, and the process, the technique, like the things I know now. If I could have did some of those things when I was giving birth, I don't think I would have been taking all the medicines and, getting C-sections and things like that, but it wasn't taught and it wasn't known.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. So, Kelly, let me ask you, um, during your pregnancy with your son that was stillborn, can you share just a little bit with us about how you were feeling throughout the pregnancy? Did you feel heard by your medical care persons? Did they make you feel like they were paying attention to what was going on with you or what you were saying? Because as Latoya was saying, sometimes I think that the mothers don't really get voices in what they need, because medical professionals assume what they learned in school. That's the way it's supposed to be. But every situation is different. When you were going through what you were going through with your baby, do you feel like you were heard, or what was your experience like? You're muted.
I was absolutely not heard because from the beginning, something didn't seem right. And initially, I went to the doctor, and for 3 months, I was told I was not pregnant. And I kept saying, something's going on, because I wasn't a person. I had a regular cycle. Like everything about my body was saying that I was pregnant, but I was going there and they were saying I was not pregnant. And the way I found out I was pregnant, and by the time I found out I was pregnant, I was like going, into my second trimester. I was like in my fourth month, and I had gone to the doctor because people started asking me. People were saying, "Are you pregnant?" I was like, "No, the doctor said I'm not pregnant. I've had like 3 different pregnancy tests and they all were negative, and I went to get a job and the lady said, "You're pregnant." And I was like, "No, ma'am, like I'm really not." Like I was getting really upset with people saying it, but I went to the doctor. I was late for the appointment, and the lady said because I was late, he couldn't see me. And I just broke down and started crying. It was like I wasn't late because I wanted to be late. Something happened and da da da. And I guess I was so hysterical that she had the doctor to see me. And those of us that know about like the stages, like in the beginning, in the early stages of pregnancy, they have to use the wand and insert it in you to see and hear the baby's heartbeat and all of that. By the time that they figured out I was pregnant, they could just do the stuff on the top of my stomach. I was that far gone. And it was just a month and a half later that I got a tear in my bag. And I went to the hospital, and they were like, "Oh, you just have a urinary tract infection. Just go home and relax." And then the next morning, I was in full blown labor. So it was a whole series of like, I'm trying to tell you something is wrong here. I'm trying to tell you something's going on with my body, and they were like, "Yeah, no, it's okay. It's just this, it's just that." And by the time I got the tear on a Friday night, and by Saturday I was in labor. So when I go to the hospital now, they're trying to stop the labor, and they kept me in the hospital for 3 or 4 days trying to set if I got me off my feet, maybe the tear would heal itself, or and it did not. So I lost all the fluid and my son died. And so I mean, I think it was just a whole series of them not understanding that. I mean, I may not know the medical terms for everything that's going on with me, but I know something is not right. But nobody heard me.
Wow. That's interesting, and that's powerful. And I'm going to have Christy share her experience, a little bit of her experience next. But I meant to say this at the opening. We had another sister. Her name was Sylvia, and a Mother's Cry started an initiative called Sylvia Sister Circle in honor of her memory, because she too um, had a horrible experience while she was pregnant and kept going back and forth to the hospital. And they kept sending her back home, telling her she was okay. And then one final time she goes, she ended up being medevacs to the trauma house unit in Baltimore. Um, and they told the family basically they didn't think they could save the baby, but they were going to do everything they could to save her. She was into a coma and all of that. Um, and I come from a praying family, so we weren't going to just sit back and accept that. But she lived and the baby lived, but all of her organs shut down while she was going through that. She ended up having really bad, I think it's called preeclampsia. Um, and she, and her organs shut down. So even though she lived, the remaining, I think she lived like maybe another 4 or 5 years or 6 years. She had all sorts of complications. And when she passed, she was actually living, she was on dialysis and living in a nursing home setting. And all of that came from the preeclampsia, undiagnosed and untreated. And by the time they realized, oh, this is what's going on, it was, almost too late. And so this is why I do this, for one reason, is in honor of her, because we're not going to ever let her be forgotten. And we're not going to allow what she went through to be forgotten either. All right, Christy, tell us a little bit about your experience.
So yeah, in my last period of pregnancy, I was incarcerated. I was about 6 to 8 weeks pregnant when I was locked up, and I received no prenatal care the entire pregnancy. So I took a plea deal to get out because my bond was very large, over $160,000. And so I took the plea, pled guilty, got out, and 5 days later, I delivered a set of twins and found out actually on the delivery table that I was having twins. And so just the way my work, centers on the way in which mothers who are in need are not given support, but are given incarceration, are given judgment and stigma. And my experience demonstrates that, right? I had a high risk pregnancy. Multiple birth is a high risk pregnancy. I don't care if you're in perfect health, right? And then I'm inside of a carceral facility. I'm not receiving any regular care. And so not having regular routine prenatal care, not being able to, your nutrition inside is very limited. Pregnant women oftentimes receive between 1,300 and 1,500 calories a day while they're incarcerated. And so imagine that's what we do when we're dieting. Like when we want to cut calories, right? We go down to 13, 14, 15. We don't go less than 1,200 calories because that's considered not healthy. And that's if you want rapid weight loss, right? And so imagine being pregnant and only being fed between the hours of 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. So there's a 12-hour window where you're not eating, you're not drinking. And those were the conditions that I survived in for many, many days, months. But there are other people who I've worked with who actually were not able to get out in time. And so they experienced during their birth, they are shackled to the bed by their arm and by their leg while they're delivering because they're incarcerated. There is a guard, oftentimes a male guard, that is standing at the bed watching the delivery happen, a stranger you do not know. Your family is not allowed to come into the room. They are not allowed to be in contact with you. And once you have the baby, you're allowed about anywhere from 24 to 48 hours with that baby. But you can only hold your baby while you're shackled to the bed, right? So you can't get up and move around and sing and dance with your baby or any of those things. You have to lie in the bed. And then if you don't have anyone to come pick up that baby is placed in state custody. And if your sentence is longer than 15 to months to 2 years, then your rights will be automatically terminated with no chance of ever being reunited with your baby. And so it is just a series of assaults that mothers who are incarcerated face. Most of the mothers who are incarcerated are Black women. Women are the fastest growing population of people inside of carceral spaces, with since the 1970s and early 80s, 1,000% increase in the number of women, mostly Black women. And most of the women who are incarcerated are not there for things that we think people are incarcerated for. So when we think people get locked up, they're there because they were robbing, killing, raping, molesting kids. No, the majority of people who are there because they were too poor to afford proper legal representation, and they had their substance use and mental health, which are medical conditions, criminalized instead of treated. And so our jails and prisons have become a de facto mental health substance use treatment facilities without the proper care that a regular substance abuse and treatment facility would have. And so being shackled, having your baby removed, I can't, postpartum is hard enough. But to not know where your baby is, to not know what is happening with your baby, to not be able to bond with your baby, to not be able to breastfeed your baby, those are the things that women are experiencing. And it's very similar to what our ancestors experienced on the plantation when they were forced into birthing and forced to sell their children off, for their children to be sold off or for them to be raised by someone else because they had to work and toil in the field. That same phenomenon of familial separation and the unmothering of Black mothers is what we are experiencing inside of jails and prisons. And it is, it really is an attack on Black mothers, because when white mothers are substance using, they are seen as patients in need of treatment. And when Black mothers are substance using, they are seen as junkies who need to be locked up. And so there's a fundamental difference in how we treat people based on race and based on access. And so the work that I do is to close that gap. If we can have compassion and if we can hold compassion and accountability for white addicts, we can also hold compassion and accountability for Black folks. What we see oftentimes is there's a high level of accountability for Black women with low compassion, but on the flip side, there's a high compassion for white women with low accountability from them, and that has led also to their detriment. White women have experienced in the opiate epidemic, greater deaths of overdose because of that. They have not been held accountable by the system. They are allowed to continue down that path, and that path has led ultimately to their deaths. And so this is a real issue that we are speaking on when we talk about the racial disparities that exist. Black mamas in this country have always been viewed as deviant, as have our children. And that is why Black women, no matter how much they make or how much education they have, are struggling to birth healthy babies and survive that birth in this country, because our value has always been in question in this country, even though this country has depended on us and our children to literally create and sustain this project of America, right? Because America is a project, right? Not the project. Well, it is kind of ghetto, but it is a project, right? And so because of that, this is something that we're practicing and learning. This is a democracy that has never existed in history before, right? But what we do see is that no matter where we are in time, Black women and our bodies are always under scrutiny, and our reproduction is always in question. And so I've been preaching this for so many years. And in 2022, when Roe versus Wade was taken down by Dobbs, we saw this mass revelation of white women like, oh my God, our reproductive rights are under attack. And it was like, baby, I live in the South. I'm a Black woman in the South. My reproductive rights have always been on the table. They have always been up for political discussion, right? And so what we have seen happening to women who are incarcerated, them having diminished rights, we have now seen that trickle out to the rest of society, including affluent white people who are no longer able to access care in the ways in which they have historically.
Jamie, can I?
Wow, that was powerful, because I just was having a conversation with someone recently about Black women's bodies. We've never really been allowed to really own our bodies, right? Somebody's always been trying to dictate to us what we should be doing with our body, how we should look. It's like we were just seen as a commodity, and for, bearing children for somebody to make money off of. And unfortunately, a lot of that mentality is, pours into other systems. outside of just slavery on the plantation. So thank you so much for sharing that. I have a couple more questions for you in a few minutes, but I'm going to give Jasmine a chance to share her experience.
Hello. So I have a almost 2-year-old. I found out that I was pregnant with him at about 19 and a half weeks. So my pregnancy was already shortened per se. In my experiencing the pregnancy was already shortened. And then on the day that I gave birth, I found out I had HELLP syndrome. And I found out that the symptoms for HELLP syndrome usually present themselves around 16 weeks. Well, when I was 16 weeks, I didn't know that I was pregnant. So all of the symptoms that I was feeling leading up to my birth, I thought that I was just kind of, complaining because it was my first pregnancy. I thought, all pregnant women are tired. Everybody swells. Everybody, is irritable and everything. But I didn't realize that my symptoms were kind of to the max per se. My blood pressure kind of stayed normal the entire time until the day I gave birth. It was out of whack. And that's what made them send me to labor and delivery. And then when I was there, someone came in, a resident had come in, and she was a Black female, well, African female. And she highly recommended that I get a C-section. And she was like, you need to get the baby out as soon as possible. Go ahead and get a C-section. Because this particular syndrome, HELLP syndrome, can be deadly to you. But I was kind of dead set on having a natural birth. But at that point, when they told me that it's kind of life or death, I just wanted to do what was going to be safe. But the attendant came in and he thought it was a good idea to let me give birth. So I gave a natural birth, and a few hours after I gave birth to my son, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 hours, maybe. That whole day is still kind of a blur. I'm still piecing things together. A doctor came to me and told me that I was bleeding internally and that my HELLP syndrome had progressed, and I had to have 2 different surgeries to correct all of that. And at the end, that experience was very good, actually. I didn't have any negative experience as far as the healthcare system or the workers that I was with. I ended up at shock trauma. They have some of the smartest doctors I've ever met in my life there. So I had a very, very good experience with that. And my son is here. He's good. He's healthy. So that was very important to me. But shortly thereafter, I had him, and that experience, I found out that I was pregnant again. No, I didn't wait my 6 weeks. Sorry, y'all. But I found out that I was pregnant again. and initially, they told me that the pregnancy wasn't going to be viable. And because of, I got laid off from my job, so I didn't have any insurance. And then there was a holdup with me receiving Medicaid for some reason. So I ended up going to a place that was Catholic run, that was just free, that would give ultrasounds. So when you tell me that my pregnancy is not viable, I'm thinking, okay, I need to go to the doctor. They're going to, DNC, all of this kind of stuff. But because of what kind of establishment they were, they didn't want to press that issue. They wanted me to continue to come and get sonograms week by week. So I think the second or the third sonogram, there was actually a heartbeat. But what they were so busy trying to push their agenda, what they weren't telling me was my babies weren't developed enough for how far along I was supposed to be. I was only, I want to say the babies were maybe about 8 weeks, and I was supposed to be a little bit farther along than that. So that was something that I wasn't told just at all. I didn't know. I thought that what they were measuring is how far along I was. So they continued to grow. They ended up being twins. They continued to grow. And then I ended up going to the hospital because I had a miscarriage at the end. That's the sum of the story. I ended up having a miscarriage. So, and this was weeks later. So I'm developing and I'm feeling things and I'm thinking, okay, well, this pregnancy is progressing. So I'm gonna leave it alone. I'm leaving it in God's hands. So I go to the hospital to have the miscarriage, essentially, because I kind of knew what was going to happen. I just knew I just didn't need to do it at home because of my history with HELP syndrome and bleeding and all of that kind of stuff, I knew I probably needed to go to the hospital. So I went there, and it was just not, I felt like I was very like ignored and pushed aside when I went to the ER. I had started having a miscarriage, and I had on like gray sweatpants or something like that, and I bled all through my pants. I was sitting in a wheelchair because the pain was so excruciating, I couldn't stand up. So, I kept asking, like, you guys know what's going on with me. I've checked in, like, like, can I at least get some privacy, like some decency? I'm not asking to be seen ahead of anybody, because I work in the hospital. I understand triage process and all of that. So I'm like, I'm not asking to be seen, but can I just have a little bit of privacy with what's going on? And he looked at me and was like, well, we know she's having a miscarriage. Like, we know what's going on, and just kind of brushed me off. So I had to go through that experience in front of a waiting room full of probably over 100 people. And the people in the waiting room took better care of me than the staff that night, which was embarrassing for me because I work in the healthcare system. I have my entire life. Like, that's where I know LaToya from. Like, it was very like embarrassing and discouraging to me. Luckily, I did get to file a complaint, and different measures were taken to correct that action. So it didn't go unnoticed, and it's not just a story I'm telling, from a perspective of somebody who didn't do anything about it. So it was corrected, and the person was educated, and I don't know about their employment. I didn't push the issue that far, but I really needed him to know, like, you can't do that to us. Like, this is something that happens to all of us all the time, and it's ignored. It's just brushed under the rug. So that was my experience with that. And yeah, that's pretty much what I was going to share.
Wow, that's traumatic. Like, that's traumatizing for me, and I wasn't even there. But it's like the humiliation, the embarrassment, so
Yeah.
I want you to spell for us the name of that syndrome in case someone wants to look it up, or they may come across it. They can have some idea of what it's about. What are it's an acronym for that, right?
Yes, HELLP. And the entire acronym, I'm never accurate when I say it, so I'm not gonna demolish it on the internet. But basically, your liver is shot, and your blood no longer clots, so you can bleed spontaneously.
Wow. Okay. That's yeah. Okay, so I was thinking as you were talking, and just about everybody on here has mentioned God in some form or another. And I was thinking, like I'm always thinking because of the work that I do through my nonprofit, where are spiritual leaders in situations like this? This is where I'm going to ask Kelly to respond. Why is the faith community silent about things like Black disparities in Black maternal health care, Black mothers in prisons being mistreated? Because the whole thing about, I had talked to a mother whose daughter gave birth while she was in prison, and she was, like Christy said, she was handcuffed to the bed, and it's just horrible. And then, she was saying she was upset because she was trying to talk to some of the ladies at her church, asking them to pray, for her daughter, that she, because she was having a really bad time with postpartum depression and psychosis. And they were kind of like, well, if she hadn't committed the crime, she wouldn't have to, worry about it. So I just want to know, and I know other people do too, where is the faith community in this, and what should we be doing?
So, one of my favorite lines I tell people all the time is, I'm glad you asked that. But the reason I say that is because for two reasons. One is I was listening to Christy's story, and part of what I do as a mental health therapist is I work with parents whose children have been taken away from them by the system, right? And I'm working with them through all of these things, I call them the hoops that they want them to jump through to get their children back. So, they got to take this class, they got to do this, they got to do that. And you talking about, really a stigma. Like the minute we talk about this in class, the minute you say, oh, I'm going to class to take parenting classes or anger management, people immediately think, oh, you abused your children or you did something. And they don't even know why your children are out of your care. But that's the same kind of principle that happens with the religious community. I always say what people don't understand, they fear. And when they fear it, they create a story that makes them feel safe or better. So one of the things, to your point, as much as people may never come right out and say it, religion kind of puts stigma on anything that they feel like doesn't match up to what they agree is like right. So if I am a person, if like you said, like I did drugs, or maybe I did something, and as a result of that, my children were taken away, or um, even simpler, I get in a situation and maybe, somebody takes advantage of me, rather than people seeing it from the perspective of what happened. They are more to like pointing a finger as to what they think is the why. Well, if you hadn't done this, like you said about the young lady in prison, in my job, I see a lot of crazy things happening. And one of the things I always say, I don't care what you did. Like if a woman's been taken advantage of or whatever, like nothing justifies another person mistreating you. And one of the things that I work really hard as a pastor and as a therapist to get people to really see how they're supposed to be together. But you're talking about a group of people, a culture of people who just recently started accepting the fact that you can be a Christian and have mental health issues. Because for the longest, you couldn't even talk about depression. You couldn't even talk. And now it's interesting. And I'm excited when I see even people like that are like high profile Christians who say, yeah, I was really going through some depression. I was really, because so many times we've been made to feel like, and it goes way back historically to when your grandmom and my grandmom were children and were being molested by their dads or their uncles and they were told, you don't tell anybody that. You don't talk about against the family. So everything that happens to you, you had to keep it in. And so that concept is because we as a culture are very spiritual people. So that concept, we brought that into what our faith and into our belief system. And so now we still preach that to our children. Like, don't tell the story. Like, don't tell the story like there is something to be ashamed of, right? I remember when Jasmine was talking, I remember our parents were pastors, and I was 17 years old, and I got pregnant with Kevin, LaToya's friend. And because of my dad's place in the community, I just thought he gonna put me right out of this house. Like, I'm gonna have to get out of this house. But much to my surprise, because if you knew my dad, he was not the mainstream religious kind of person. And he said to me, he walked down the day that I found out I was pregnant. He walked down to my room and he said, your mom told me that you were pregnant. And, he was military. So we said, yes, sir, no, sir. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, you're not the first and you won't be the last. And that is all he said about my pregnancy. Whereas I know other pastors who at that time, when their daughters got pregnant, they made them stand up in front of the church. They made them do all of these crazy things to try to bring shame. So this is why people aren't as open and honest to the Christian world, because instead of us embracing people like our greatest example, Jesus did, and meeting them where they are, we're quick to form an opinion of how you got there. Well, it doesn't matter how I got there, and it doesn't. And so there has to be some education to the Christian world that says, again, we are living on grace, and we have to give grace to get grace. So I'm not, just because I ain't smoking weed doesn't mean I don't have something that the creator has to work with me on, right? So I'm still a work in progress. You're still a work in progress. But so to answer your question, where are we? There are, and I won't put us all into the same bucket, but because there are some who are coming out and who are saying, hey, listen, been there, done that. Like, it's okay. Because look, God is a healer. He's a restorer. He can fix it. Nothing's too hard for him. I remember at the death of my son, leaving the hospital without him was hard for me as a mom. And I tell people this all the time. I remember hearing people say years ago that I had the pain so severe that my heart literally hurt. And I kept thinking, oh, that ain't real. Until it was me and my heart was hurting. And I remember holding my shirt because my heart was hurting. And I remember thinking this pain was too intense for me, right? So people's idea of supporting you, just like when you grieve or whatever, is trying to find something great to say to kind of make them feel better about what you're going through. And in the Christian world, that's what we tend to do. Like, we want to feel better. So we got to find something to say to make us feel better that, that you're going through something. But this is not about me. I'm sorry. Is that me? You? I think when we are able to say, but for the grace of God, there go I, when we're really able to live under I'm not a better than anybody just because you're incarcerated, or just because you did drugs, or just because you chose a man over your children in that moment. I tell kids of parents that have had that, I said, listen, in that moment, they were being the best parent they knew how to be in that moment. Because if they were on drugs, they were being the best parent they could be as a substance user. If they were out there prostituting, that was the best they felt they could do in that moment. And until we are learned to be accepting, to answer your question, and stop being so judgmental and just be honest, like, that's your issue, but I have an issue of my own. So where the church should be is aligned with people that are going through these things, and share your own story, because a lot of people have kept silent from shame, but I promise you they have a story, and sometimes it's very similar to the ones that they hear other people share.
All right, ladies. First of all, let me say, I don't know what's going on with the connection, that we keep losing it, and I apologize for that, but I really can't control that right this minute. But I think we're hearing enough of what's being said that we can get the message that these ladies are bringing to us tonight. Latoya, I want to ask you a question. How does doula support? First of all, explain to the audience exactly what a doula is. You can give a little bit of background about, the whole, where it came from, and what support do you think that when you have a doula in the room with you, how does that improve the chance of you having better outcomes in childbirth?
So, years ago when we had slavery and all those things, African Americans didn't get the same treatment as white women. So they end up having midwives and doulas. They had ladies in their own towns that came and helped them through birth, that helped them. That's where it really came from, being a doula or a birth worker, is to make sure that our communities had that support. And even now, it's the same thing, because doulas are coming back popular, because it's like, what, 3 out of 4 Black women die during childbirth. And for a lot of reasons, like I stated before, advocacy, we don't get the same care. Me being a nurse, I know for a fact, working in healthcare, that African Americans do not get the same care, just like Christy was speaking on before. A lot of times when you see an African American or a Latino or, someone of a different culture, the doctors medicate them differently than they do the white peers for the same thing, where they might order me to give an oxycodone to this one, but this one can only have a Motrin. So, and that's the same thing. So the doulas come into play with just making sure you have a plan, that you have someone advocating. Like, before you go in there, we go over different birthing techniques. Like, if your cervix is not opening up, we can get on this peanut ball and do this. We can do this. Instead of getting, right off the bat, an epidural, which is going to stop you from babying the push and feel your legs, then you're going to end up in the OR, because most people without doulas end up in the OR. We'll try this. I'll put a TENS unit on your back. We'll try to put the comb in your hand. We'll get on the ball. We'll do the music. We'll do a dance. We'll do things to take your mind off of it, because essentially we just need to get your mind off of the pain, so that we can do other things. Your cervix not open up. We're going to go sit over the toilet and try to, do exercises to get it up. So the doula is there to help support you, so that if your goal is to have a natural birth, you can have that. If your goal is to try to stay out the OR, we can try to stay out the OR. And not only that, we can help you advocate, have a voice. Now what we don't do in the hospitals, because we want to have good relationships, I'm not going to go back and forth with your nurse or your doctor, but I'm going to come in there with the plan, and I'm going to give it to them, and I'm going to talk to my client, my person, and say, hey, if they explain anything to you, is this what you want to do? We can still try X, Y, Z. That way they feel empowered to speak for themselves, because a lot of times they're not empowered or not educated. Just like I said, like, even with me, the things I teach now when I am in a birth and a labor, I didn't know that stuff. I laid there and just did whatever they told me. When I had my first son, you weren't even allowed to get out of bed then. I will have to say, this last birth that I did, the labor and delivery team there was amazing, and they worked with us, and they tried to honor, and they kept coming back in, looking at the birth plan that I had typed up for her, and they kept trying to honor it. So I was very happy. And they had more stuff now. So they had like the peanut ball there. They were working with me just as hard as I was working to keep her out of OR and the opener service and keeping, they were working too. So it has progress some, but we still need that advocacy, because just like I said, there's still those moments, oh, this ain't working, or oh, that's not working, we gotta go to the OR. That's still the to-go person, and that's why having a doula is important, because you're more equipped, you're more educated, you feel more empowered when you have a doula that's there, because we're having these visits before you go. So I'm telling you stuff, I'm showing you stuff, you're doing stuff, so you feel like you can cope a little bit better than you did when you didn't know. It's just like, even in the spiritual realm, you might have all these gifts, but if nobody cultivates them and helps grow them and educate you, you got gifts, but you might not use them right, or you might not know how to handle the gifts that you have to the fullest, because you still need that education, that that push. So that's what being a doula is to help you be able to push, with as minimum complications as possible. Could there possibly be complications still and you do everything right? Absolutely. But we're there to help support you, to support the mom, support the dad, set the atmosphere, and just make sure that everybody in the room knows what this mother wants, whether black, white, or orange. We all, whatever she wants, that's the goal we're there for, of trying to get. And also making sure that they know that there's other things that you can try, because oftentimes we don't know, so we just say yes to anything. And that's not with just having a baby, but that's a lot of things. When you don't know, you just, yes, okay, that sounds good. no, it don't sound good. Did you try XYZ? You know, they told the mother that was having a baby that she wasn't progressing. And I took her in the bathroom a few times, let her sit on the toilet, and they came back an hour later and she was ready to push the baby out. You know, but again, without that peace and that knowledge and that teaching, she was gonna be in the OR. You know, so that's where we fall in, to just try to make sure that, especially in the Black maternal health, that you have an advocate, that you have someone that's also seeking and speaking on your behalf, and that can help educate you and can help look and say, I know what they're saying, but let's try this first. Can you give us another couple hours to see if this helps them? You know, so it's really just about being a good support person, an advocate, and educating. You know, it's a lot of work through the process, because you're constantly there trying to, you know, stimulate their mind to take it off of the pain and the pressure, and you're empowering them to say, I say this all the time when they're going through and it's hurting, I'm like, you can do this, you got it. And it's like, oh, I can't take the pain. You can. And I just keep speaking life into them until they believe it themselves and they do it. So that's really what it's about.
Jamie, what I think is
Yes.
interesting that is the common thread is I was thinking about what you do around advocacy about prison in general, right? And I think about, somebody said earlier, like, you watch, and I used to work for parole and probation in Salisbury, and what you would see was a Black boy and a white boy have the same crime but get a different sentence. Just like she was talking about the different medicines, because they go, oh, we don't want you to get addicted. Well, you didn't mind her getting addicted, and she over there addicted as I don't know, all get out. But you were over here telling me all I need is an extra strength Tylenol, but she got oxy for the same level of pain for the same surgery, right? And then they start counting yours. Well, when it's not time for your refill, you got to wait 2 days or what. I think again, it's this disparity that we see in the way we're being taken care of in our health field is over the gambit of just how we're treated as African American people, period. They see us as, and to Latoya's point, because we don't know. I was just telling some people today, like, we don't know our rights and we don't know what we can advocate and speak up for. And one of the things I remember is having my son at 17, when they pushed me out of the hospital that day, one of those old white nurses said to me, see you next year. And she didn't know me from anything, but statistics say that girls who have babies before they're 18 tend to have another one like very shortly thereafter. And that's how they perceive us, and that's how they see us. And then again, the kinds of insurance that we can afford send us to certain doctors who, they don't really, they're not the top of the game. So they give you how they perceive you. And I think that's even with, all of the health issues. I was listening to Jasmine, like, but you had yourself, like, even gone to the emergency room and had these experiences. It's like that they wouldn't do to other people. So I think it's like, again, somebody speaking up for you, and people know, like JB had some incidents where she had several operations. I would just go to the hospital just so that I'm a presence, so they know somebody's here that cares about this person. And when they start taking too long, then I start peeping down the hallway, like, she's still in here needing some assistance. Where yo at? And I get, I've worked in the hospital, I get it's busy, but I think, again, advocacy is not always about being rude and nasty and cussing them out, but it's about saying, hey, listen, I need some care. Like, I need, and Jasmine did the right thing, because you can't never win by giving them what they expect, like acting the way they expect you to. But you can go high when they go low and get a lot done. So I think that's also an awareness that we have to tell people, like, you have a voice, you use your voice and say what you need, speak up for yourself.
Okay, I think we had some disconnection right there, but everything that you all have said has been so true. And I'm glad that we were able to shine some light on some things tonight that people may not have even had any idea about. So I have a question I want to ask Jasmine, and then one more question for Christine. For Christy, I'm sorry. And then I'm going to let you ladies go. Again, I appreciate you taking time. Each and every one of you is busy, and I appreciate you taking time to be with me tonight. Jasmine, what does healing look like for you now, post all of that trauma with 2 pregnancies? What does healing look like for you now?
Taking better care of myself and prioritizing self-care. And my mental health was out of here. I heard somebody mention earlier about postpartum and psychosis, and I definitely, like, postpartum, my hormones were everywhere. I did and said things that I still don't remember to this day. Like, it was really bad. So definitely putting my mental health first, my faith, having that solid foundation. When everything, gets all crazy and all of that, you got to have something firm to stand on. So whatever you believe or whoever you talk to, stand on them. So that's important. That's what healing looks like for me. And also my physical health, just taking care of myself, period, because we get so busy as moms and wanting to take care of everything and everybody else, we don't realize we can't pour from an empty cup. So we got to keep ourselves healthy. So that's what healing looks like for me.
I love it. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to see you, posting happy things with the baby, how he's taking over the house, which they do at age 2. You threaten to put him outside at least 2 or 3 times a day. But that just comes with the territory. But I'm very proud of you. You're doing a great job. So I have one final question for you, Christy. And then I want to ask everybody to answer a question, and then I'm going to let you ladies go. Christy, what policies do you see that must change, absolutely have to change, with regard to how Black mothers are taken care of in this country?
I think we have to allow Black people, Black mothers, to have more autonomy in decision making. I watched a video a few weeks ago of a woman who was birthing, and there was an iPad in her face with a judge trying to convince her, or trying to decide, should he order her to have a C-section, when she herself was a birth worker and a doula, did not believe that she needed a C-section, believed that other things could happen. So it really does mean that we have to promote bodily autonomy. It doesn't just, and that really means people deciding what they do with their bodies. And when we talk about substance use and mental health, does it mean that they have to have treatment? Does it mean that they have to do these things? Bodily autonomy looks like being able to make decisions about yourself and your care and your family. And I think that, so policies that promote people's decision making, their autonomy, promoting solutions that are best for that particular family, their culture, their way of life. We have to have more inclusion and diversity at the policymaking tables. The folks who make decisions are old white men. They don't have a uterus. They are white. They are at the top of the totem pole in society. So they have no idea what's happening at the margins. And so what happens right now is those of us at the margins have to scream loud enough so that our voices make it to the center, And then we hope and pray that they do something about it. We need to radically shift that. The folks at the center need to be listening to the people at the margins, placing them in the positions of power, not just as advisors, but actually decision makers to make the decisions that are best for themselves and their communities. I mean, these are communities that white folks ain't never gonna live in, no way. So why they just don't let us do what we need to do over in them anyway? I mean, they already redlined and made sure we couldn't live out of certain zip codes. You already got us segregated in so many ways. Just let us be over here segregated, right? And they won't even do that. So I think we need to just promote the autonomy of Black folks. Number one, in this country, there's always been questions about Black people's citizenship. Are we citizens? Are we full citizens? And if we are, what kind of stewards of that citizenship are we going to be? And I think that we have proven time and time again that we are good stewards of citizenship. Even with diminished citizenship, we still show up for ourselves and our communities in radical, meaningful, and transformational ways. And so I think that policy needs to reflect the people that the policy is actually trying to impact the most. The people who are most impacted by the policy should be having the most input on how that policy actually plays out. And I also think we just need to listen to Black women, trust Black women. When a Black woman tells you X, Y, or Z, you need to believe that. You need to listen and you need to act. And you need to ask her, what do you need from me? And if you ask the question of someone, what do they need? You have to be prepared to either give it to them or connect them to a way to get it. And so stop asking performative questions when you don't really care about the answer, but ask questions where you're actually listening to the answer and being prepared to do something. I've been an organizer for the last 10 to 15 years. And in organizing, we ask 3 questions. Who are my people? What are their problems? And what are we going to do? That's it. Who are my people? My people are pregnant, incarcerated people who are substance using, right? What's their problem? They're not receiving treatment and care and support. What we're going to do, we're going to create policies and laws and narrative change so that they get the concrete and material conditions of their lives changed. There's no need for us to continue to go out voting and doing all this organizing if the concrete and material conditions don't change. So all of this advocacy, the work that we're doing, there's no need to have Black maternal health every week if Black women are still going to be dying, right? So we have to, yes, organize, but we also have to activate. It is not just about organizing. Now that we've organized and we've educated ourselves, what is our plan? And we have to have a collective plan as Black women. And that collective plan has to include Indigenous women, because Indigenous women in this country have faced the same atrocities that Black women have faced. And we can learn a lot from their experiences in this country, in the history. And there's a lot to glean and to gain. And so we really do have to connect with the most marginalized and the most impacted, put those voices at the center, listen to them. We know what we need. And I've given birth 3 times, right? And I remember one time I was giving birth and they told me, oh, wait a minute, hold on, stop pushing because the doctor's not here. And my body did not listen to that. My body was continuing to birth, regardless of if a doctor with some scrubs had washed their hands and sat down or not. Like, my body was doing what it needed to do. And so our bodies were designed to birth with unassisted. Like, if we didn't have doulas, if we didn't have nurses or doctors, a woman would still have that baby, right? And so we need to do things to lessen the intervention in birth and increase the support. And that's really what it looks like. Allowing families to give birth in the places that they feel safe and comfortable and in the ways in which they feel comfortable. They want to walk around, bounce on the ball, in the tub, on the knees, on the back, in the stirrups. All of that should be at play. And there should be no one telling someone how they should bring life into this world. And all life should be brought into this world with dignity.
I love that. I love that. And I think you said something really important that I wanted to make sure I mentioned tonight. This is not the end of the conversation, because it's not just a conversation that we're having. It's a call for us to speak up and to speak out and to do more than just shake our head and say, that's a shame. We've got to do more than that. All right. I have one more question I want to ask every person, and then I'm going to let you ladies go. I want each one of you in one sentence to tell me, what do Black mothers deserve? Latoya, what do Black mothers deserve?
You mean far as labor, like pregnancy,
or just in general? In general, what do Black women deserve
Well, in that case, I'm gonna take a little turn to the left and say to be free of judgment. Just because, especially with raising children and having children, and like she said, I was a teenage mom, so I know all those things. And a lot of times we're already judged before we even get into any room, before we get into the delivery room, the doctor's office, the school, the college, the whatever. There's already a label and a stigma on you. And I know that for a fact because I remember when I got pregnant with my first son, but that's greater than a sentence. But I was told I was going to be a statistic, and I worked twice as hard to make sure I never was what they said. I never was on welfare. I never was on all the things that they spoke over, all the word curses that they spoke over my life. I made sure that I was the opposite. So I would say just to be free of judgment, because even in having birth, a lot of times that's what they're afraid of, that people are looking at them like, I can't ask for this because this, or I don't want to say this because now I look weak, or so that's a big piece for Black mothers.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. All right, Jasmine, in one sentence, what do Black mothers deserve?
To be seen, acknowledged, recognized. That pretty much sums it up, those three words: seen, acknowledged, and recognized. We do a lot, we carry a lot, and it seems like we're not heard enough. So that needs to change.
Awesome. Thank you. Kelly?
I was thinking that basically it's just to be accepted, not just by others, but by ourselves.
I like that. Yeah. Okay. Christy, I think you already said yours. But
well, I'll give you one last one. I think that at our core, Black mothers deserve to be fully human in a world that too often treats us as anything but.
I love that. Absolutely. Well, ladies, again, I thank each and every one of you for bringing your voice to the table tonight. Again, I apologize for technical difficulties that I really don't have any control over, but I apologize anyway. And I just really appreciate each one of you brought a unique piece to this conversation. And I'm going to go back and listen because I want to take some notes on some of the things that you all said. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to staying in touch. If I can do anything for you, if I can do anything for you, just let me know. I appreciate you so much. Good night. Love you guys.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.